Well, I wanted to share some perspective from some of our children, not ours particularly, but ours. So a mom saw a thunderstorm forming in mid-afternoon, and she worried about her 7-year-old daughter who would be walking the 3 blocks from school to home. And so deciding to meet her, the mother saw her daughter walking nonchalantly along, stopping to smile whenever lightning flashed. Seeing her mother, the little girl ran to her, explaining happily, "All the way home, God's been taking my picture." And a Sunday school teacher asked her class, "Does anyone here know what we mean by sins of omission?" And a small girl replied, "Aren't those the sins we should have committed but didn't?" And a father was reading Bible stories to his young son. He read, "The man named Lot was warned to take his wife and flee out of the city. But his wife looked back and was turned to salt. And his son asked, 'What happened to the flea?'" And last but not least, 6-year-old Katie and her 4-year-old brother Johnny were sitting together in church. Johnny giggled and sang and talked out loud, and finally his big sister had had enough. "You're not supposed to talk out loud in church." "Why? Who's going to stop me?" Johnny asked. And Katie pointed to the back of the church and said, "See those 2 men standing by the door? They're hushers." You guys are hushers. Yeah, hushers. So happy, joyful Sunday. So I love the topic of joy. It's one of my favorite topics. Joy is kind of near and dear to my heart. I kind of feel like it's kind of what I'm supposed to be expressing on the planet, especially. And so I wanted to talk about that. And of course, you know, all of you have heard probably ad nauseum at this point about this precious 2-year-old goddaughter that is in my life. And she just epitomizes joy. And so, you know, seeing these jokes, and I got to see her yesterday. And there's a recent picture on Facebook that I wanted to share with you. Keith, if you would bring that up. Okay, this is my goddaughter. And and I love how serious she is, like, "Is there a problem?" She totally and completely embraces the idea of being, we call it a goober, you know, just the goofiness and silliness. And her parents are the same way, and they teach her that. And so I just thought, wow, things are looking kind of serious a lot in our world. And I thought it is time for us to reconnect with our joy. So I told Keith, I said, I think we just need to keep that up there. Let's just keep this slide up there the whole time. So in case, you know, you start to nod off during the talk, you can look at that and reconnect with your joy. Okay, so joy. So what is joy? Many of you know that I taught the 12 Powers this summer, and I didn't include joy only because it wasn't a Fillmorian teaching. It's a Sheryl teaching, but I really believe that joy is an inherent aspect of our divine nature. I really do. And so what is joy? And to me, it is the way that we can see the world. It's our lens of seeing the world. This little peanut walks around and sees everything with awe and wonder. I mean everything. A rock, a pine cone, a leaf. It's just the most wonderful thing. And her mom and I were talking about yesterday how fun it is to just see her brain develop. And as she develops, everything is still. It's just pure joy. And so that is who we are. And as we grow in life experiences, and as we get to be an adult, sometimes we can forget joy. See, joy, I believe, is our inherent innocence. We are inherently innocent. regardless of what's happened in our life, regardless of what anybody's ever told us. We are inherently vibrant and innocent and awesome. And so joy is also an intuitive guide. Joy is a director. And joy is a way to be confident that we're moving in the right direction. It's a way for us also to stand in our knowing. The joy of the Lord is your strength, to stand in that strength and in that knowing. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how joy is a compass for us. I think I shared with you a few months ago that I was on an airplane traveling, and I decided I wanted to do an experiment with people. So I would have a captive audience. They couldn't run away. And I would sit next to people, and I would ask them this question, and they really wanted to move away. It was funny. I remember I was sat there, and I asked this couple, I'm like, do you love your life? Just a lighthearted question. And it was amazing the answers I got. I did this. I had connections, so I had 4 flights. I was going out to California. And each time I would ask at least a couple of people the question, do you love your life? And it was amazing what they said to me. And I loved how authentic they were. Everyone was just so sweet about it. And what they talked about, when they talked about loving their life, they talked about what brought them joy. They talked about, their relationships with their spouses or their children. One woman talked about how much she loves her life when she's creatively expressing. So I thought, that is so awesome. So when we love our life, it means our life is filled with joy, joyful experiences. And so, so joy is an inherent aspect of our being. And that means it can show up regardless of what's happening outside of us as well. And I'll share a story with you. I think I've shared with you too, that my father left my family when I was 3 years old. And basically, I did not see him the majority of my life. And so when I was in my 30s, I think I'd maybe seen him like 3 times. And I decided I need to do some healing around this. And so I did some healing workshops, I did some forgiveness work, and I just got really in touch with, I want to connect with this person. And so I reached out to him, and long story short, before he died, we had 6 beautiful years. And so, as my father was in his dying process, he had a terminal illness, I was able to be with him. And he passed. And I remember driving back to Washington from North Carolina, and I was in my grieving when all of a sudden I had this moment when I just connected with the amazingness of our connection over these last 6 years. And it was like I just unleashed my joy, and I had a moment of what you might call bliss. It was like in the midst of my sadness, my heart was broken. I'm like, I only had 6 years. I connected with my joy. It's like it was just such a gift. And I was able to feel complete joy in the midst of my sorrow. That's the beauty of joy. Joy is there regardless of what's happening in our lives. And what we get to do is make room for it. Make room for the joy that we are to express. So joy, as a compass, can show up and support us in making life decisions. So I was going to buy a car. And I knew that I wanted a Honda. I'm a Honda girl. And budgetary-wise, I was looking in the Civic genre. And I thought, well, I'm just going to stop by this dealership near where my church was at the time in Kansas. So I pull into this dealership, And I walk in, and it was really dark. And the salespeople were like kind of disheveled, and they were like, "May we help you?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm in the market for a Honda Civic, and I'd really like a color other than black, because my last car was black, and it showed dirt like crazy." And so I went into this, and they brought me into this little room at this little teeny window with this man that's like, "Well," and there was no bargaining, no negotiating. And before I knew it, I left there putting down money on a car. And I got in my car and I'm driving home and I'm like, I feel no joy. And I just spent a lot of money. They didn't have the color I wanted, so they were going to order it, so it wasn't going to come in for a couple weeks. So I go home and I call my friend Lou. And I said, "Lou, this is the experience I had." She goes, "Oh, no. Car buying should be a joyful experience. I'm going to take you to my dealership." So she takes me to Missouri, to Lee Summit. I walk into the dealership. It's sunny. The salespeople come, "How are ya? Welcome." And they were having a sale. They had the color I wanted. They were negotiating with me. And I just was so joyful. And I thought, this is the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be joyful, whether we're buying a car, folks, or picking out a cantaloupe at the Giant or whatever it is. And of course, I created some drama because I didn't allow joy. I know joy's my compass. And of course, that first dealership was not happy. And they didn't want to refund the check and da-da-da-da-da. It got all worked out. But it was such a lesson for me that regardless of what I'm doing, whether, again, it's buying a car, being in a job or being in a relationship, whatever it is, it can be joy. Because joy is my nature, it is your nature. And I'm telling you, folks, when it's not joyful, you want to take a second look. I'm serious. Because joy is an indicator of flow. I am a firm believer that our lives are supposed to be joyful. It doesn't have to be so hard and so drama-filled and so significant. This one gets it about lightening up and bringing humor into life. Oh my goodness. I don't know about you, but sometimes I can just get way too serious. Yeah. One of my favorite movies is The Bucket List. Okay, remember The Bucket List? Okay, remember? So Edward is this billionaire, and Carter is this car mechanic, and they're complete strangers until they meet because they're sharing a hospital room. And so they start to talk, and they start to reflect upon the meaning of their life and how their life has been. And they both have created a list of things that they haven't done called their bucket list. And because of that, they break out of the hospital and they go on this grand adventure. And so there's two questions that I love in this one scene. And it's Edward and Carter, and they're sitting at the top of the Egyptian pyramids. And Carter explains to Edward the two questions asked of the dead by the gods at the entrance to heaven. The two questions are, have you found joy in your life? And has your life brought joy to others? Have you found joy in your life? And has your life brought joy to others? So reflect on that for a moment. Yeah. So I think it's really important when we're starting to feel like life isn't working and life is really feeling hard to reflect on the joy that you've had in your life. because I know you've had some. You've had that experience. And has your life brought joy to others? And I was thinking about that, and what came to me is, what if we all became a person of increase? You know what I mean by that? A person of increase. When you are a person of increase, someone stands across from you and they leave standing taller. They leave with an increased experience of knowing joy, knowing that they're loved. So think about it. When you stand across from people, how do they leave your presence? Did they leave increased, uplifted, inspired? Did they leave knowing more fully how amazing they are? What's possible for them? Be a person of increase. I remember on one of Oprah's shows, she had Debbie Boone on this episode. And Rosemary Clooney was Debbie Boone's grandmother. And Debbie Boone talked about how when she was a little girl, that when she would walk in the door of her grandmother's house, her grandmother would act like it was the first time she had ever seen her. It was pure joy and pure delight. And Debbie Boone said, I will never forget that, because that's how my grandmother showed her love for me, in the delight of my presence. So that has really stuck with me. So whenever I see that little peanut, which always makes me cry, she's so precious, I just want her to know the delight that I have, because I know that's something she's going to remember. Folks, let's leave here today with an inspirational, motivational commitment to be joy. To, first of all, find the joy in our life. To find it. And if we can't find it right now, let's create it. Yeah, because you are joy. Regardless of whether you feel like it right now or not. You are joy. It is your inherent nature. And what is ours to do? What is yours and mine to do to become a person of increase? So that when people are in our presence, they get how amazing they are. They're infused with life and joy and value because of who we're being in front of them. How fun is that? And I tell you, what's in it for us is that what I believe is that when we claim the joy that we are, we allow ourselves to be in life's flow. There is an infinite flow that we are that is always expressing. And joy just opens the floodgates. So I invite you this week to look for the joy in your life. Seek it out. What is it? Appreciate it. I invite us all to lighten up. Let's lighten up. Let's lighten our burdens, folks. Today, when you leave here, because I'm going to do this today, I am going to have a whole afternoon of picking all the things that I love to do. I'm going to go to a movie. I love to go to movies. And I'm going to have an ice cream cone. What brings you joy? Do it. Make room for it in your life. And lastly, let's take on this whole thing of, let's be a person of increase in our world. Let's be a commitment that because you're standing in front of me, Al, or Jamie, or Jane, or Elizabeth, that you walk away getting it about how beautiful and amazing you are. Because we're all a joyful difference in this world when we choose it. Can we choose it? Yeah. Let's own our inner gooberness. I tell you, it's a lot of fun. All right, let's affirm together. I choose joy. And so it is.